The Kinahans evolved from a small Dublin crew into Ireland's most prominent, internationally known crime syndicate. Today, the Kinahan transnational organization includes Daniel, who became a major figure in boxing through MTK Global. He advised some of the sport's biggest names. Since 2016, they've been locked in one of Ireland's most violent criminal feuds with a rival clan, a conflict tied to nearly 20 killings across Europe.
Chrissy Kinahan has been known to stay a step ahead of the law, pioneering new drug routes when old ones get shut down. He's a man of high intellect, ambition, and of course, balls.
Police had to stand back and let that happen. It was a display of power. It was choreographed to spread fear.
To trace the roots back to the 1990s, Christopher was rising in Dublin's Underworld, operating in the south of the city and supplying drugs to youths in his circle. In the early 2000s, the group split, and that fracture led to roughly a dozen deaths over almost a decade. So how did everything unfold? Let's take a look. In Dublin of the 1980s and 1990s, Christopher Kinahan was not yet a household name. He moved on the edges, running frauds and drug deals, getting caught often enough to become familiar to the courts. The difference came inside prison, where some men passed time and others built futures. Kinahan built. He studied. He turned sentences into a classroom and walked out fluent in Spanish and Dutch. That was not a party trick. Those languages were keys, because Spanish opened conversations with South American suppliers, and Dutch made the ports and logistics hubs of Benelux feel like home turf. When he was released again in 2001, he was not merely free, he was prepared. The next move set the trajectory. He relocated to the south of Spain, closer to European wholesale cocaine traffic, and further from the Kremlin-Drimna feud, heating Dublin. Distance brought him focus. Back home, his Dublin crew needed a hand on the tiller, so leadership on the ground moved to Freddie Thompson, an operator tied into Kremlin. That branch would harden into a well-established criminal group with a direct line to the new boss in Spain. The Drimna side of the old feud would be battered over time, but the point is this. The home unit was fed by an expanding pipeline, and the pipeline was controlled by a man who had traded local hustle for continental logistics. From the early 2000s forward, the Kinahan model stopped looking like a gang and started looking like a company. Cocaine became the profit engine. Heroin filled markets that still paid. Firearms were acquired and warehoused because power without enforcement is a story that ends badly. Layers appeared in the structure. Trusted fixers handled wholesalers. Transport specialists moved loads through ports and motorways. Paper companies were formed to move money, buy property, and make everything look cleaner than it was. Phones were handled like grenades. Encryption became doctrine. And the top tier kept distance from anything that could be seized on a Tuesday and turned into a courtroom name on a Friday. If a van was stopped in England or a container was pulled in Spain, the paperwork was never a direct line to the men who mattered. Then, 2010 arrived with a test. Spanish authorities launched Operation Shovel, a joint strike that hit figures linked to the organization. Arrests followed. Headlines promised a turning point. The case did not deliver what it advertised. Investigators struggled to land charges on the people at the top. The operation stalled over time, and whispers about compromised officers drifted around the edges, adding doubt and pressure, but not closure. What did become clear was the scale of the finances. Investments appeared in multiple jurisdictions. The money flowed through a lattice of fronts. The cartel was no longer a rumor. It was a transnational project with reach, assets, and a growing reputation. By the estimate that would later harden into public briefings, the network had generated more than €1 billion across its years of expansion. Ambition needs continuity. The Dapper Don is the nickname people use, but the CEO mindset is what matters. Christopher did what disciplined founders do. He built succession. His sons, Daniel and Christy Jr., were not bit players on the edges. They were trained to run the machine. They learned routes and ports, currency and cover, who to flatter and who to threaten, how to sanction a path when a courier went missing or a dockside promise fell apart. One more lesson was added. and it would change the public face of the group. Image is also a tool. Daniel stepped into professional boxing with real momentum. In 2012, he co-founded a management company known then as MGM in Marbella, a name that would later be rebranded as MTK Global. He advised fighters, networked with promoters, secured venues, and positioned himself at the center of a sport that creates introductions and normalizes high-level travel. For skeptics, it looked like a reputational rinse. For the organization, it looked like access. Parallel to that corporate face, the European distribution arm in the UK grew teeth and scale. This is where Thomas "Bomber" Kavanagh enters the timeline. Around 2004, as Christopher settled in Spain, Bomber shifted to the English Midlands, near Birmingham, to run the UK franchise. The National Crime Agency would later describe that unit as a true Kinahan franchise. Bomber operated from a fortified house with bullet-resistant features. He and close partners, including James Mulvey, oversaw multi-million shipments of cocaine and cannabis that rippled through British cities. The Gang of Four at the core of the UK node also included cousins who collected money and kept the wheels greased. Then in 2014, the ground shook. Gerard Kavanagh, Bomber's cousin and a collector who had caused problems by skimming or mishandling funds, was murdered near Marbella. Months later, his brother Paul was killed in North Dublin. The message was brutal and precise. Disloyalty or disorder inside the money stream would meet violence. Even within Bomber's inner circle, there was fear. Secretly recorded calls capture Mulvey's paranoia about Bomber's reach and ruthlessness. None of this slowed the UK machine. It sharpened it.
While we're investigating, the cops are investigating, Daniel Kinahan's carrying out his own investigation, so he's the first to know that actually this was an attempt on his life.
Gary Hutch had been a trusted man in the Kinahan sphere, working closely enough to sit near the fire. A dispute over money with Daniel escalated. An attempt was made on Daniel's life outside a luxury apartment in Spain. An innocent boxer was shot instead. Gary fled and sought shelter with his uncle, Jerry the Monk Hutch, a veteran of Irish heists who had aged into a man with money, property, and a kind of grudging respect criminal elders accumulate. A deal was discussed. The arrangement was simple on paper. Spare Gary's life in exchange for a €200,000 payment for the failed shooting. Whatever handshake was made, it did not save him. In September 2015, Gary Hutch was chased around a Marbella residential complex and shot 15 times. In the aftermath, a hit team in Lanzarote went hunting Jerry Hutch in a bar, and he slipped out of view in time to survive. The table had been flipped.
The hitman and an associate drove off, make their getaway. Police were able to identify the car. Corrupt cops basically told Daniel Kinahan this car was used in the shooting, we're absolutely sure.
On the 5th of February 2016, Dublin watched something it had not seen in its modern history. A boxing weigh-in at the Regency Hotel became a battlefield. Men in faux tactical gear resembling Garda units with Kalashnikovs entered alongside others with pistols, one disguised as a woman. The suspected target was Daniel. He was gone before the shooting started. The man who died was David Byrne, a close Kinahan associate and the younger brother of Liam Byrne, the cartel's top lieutenant in Ireland after Freddie had taken heat and later fell to a long sentence. Sean McGovern, a core Kinahan figure, was among the injured. The response was immediate. Eddie Hutch Sr., Jerry's brother, and a taxi driver with no role in the decision-making of the feud, was gunned down days later. That set the tone for what followed. Bodies began to drop with a frequency and coldness that the city had not endured in decades. Over the course of the feud, roughly 18 people would be killed, most on the Kinahan side of the ledger as initiators or commissioners, and many of the attacks would be traced by investigators to a command that ran like a business. This is the period where the organization's counter-surveillance disciplines saved lives on one side and made policing dangerous on the other. Garda units increased armed patrols and surveillance on known players. The Estonian hitman Imre Arakas landed in Ireland with a job to do on a Hutch target, not knowing he was already under watch. When officers grabbed him, messages on his device included a line that reveals the mindset. One shot to the head from distance. Possible. I will see what I can do. Murder kits were found outside Dublin in 2017. Revolvers loaded and ready. Ammunition staged for quick use. Officers in Ireland and the UK reported being followed, approached, and in some cases chased. The implied threat was clear. We are watching you. The tactical line was also clear. Do not cross into open war with the state, because that flips a different kind of switch. It was a careful balance, and it held. The center of gravity moved again. Spain had served its purpose. With the feud burning hot and Irish interest higher than ever, the leadership's European base shifted to Dubai. The attraction was obvious: luxury and privacy. A booming city that prides itself on stability and international business. No extradition treaty with Ireland. Networking space that would not look suspicious to anyone glancing quickly. Apartments with views of the Palm. Private rooms in hotels where rock stars and financiers eat in peace. A jurisdiction that for a long time felt like a safe harbor for men who wanted distance between their names and European courtrooms. From there, strategy continued. The European wing kept moving product. The UK franchise remained the main outlet. And in Dublin, soldiers and subcontractors starved for status and fed just enough cash did the bloody work of a feud without end. Law enforcement did not sit back. The Garda kept squeezing in Dublin. 79 members of the broader group ended up behind bars through the years, from triggermen to organisers. Freddie Thompson was convicted for his role in one of the feud murders. Liam Byrne, the cartel's first among equals in Ireland, felt the cab's teeth. Asset seizures took property, vehicles, jewellery, cash. 31 luxury high-end cars, a dune buggy for good measure, gold and watches, envelopes of notes. Liam left for the UK and later faced his own legal jeopardy there, but the message under the seizures mattered most. Untouchable is a myth. The state can take the shine from your reputation faster than any rival. The local ecosystem shifted as the cartel reduced its overt footprint in Dublin. A youth crew known as the Gucci Gang, led by a figure called Mr. Flashy, had grown in the vacuum. They were retailers at the end of the chain, supplied by the Kinahans during the boom, and taxed for the privilege of operating in territories that had once been policed by the cartel. Some of their young men had done work as cheap muscle during the feud. When the pipeline tightened and the Dublin command thinned, the Gucci Gang cracked. Two factions emerged. One stayed with Mr. Flashy, the other rallied around James Whelan. In April 2022, Whelan was shot dead in the middle of that internal war. Mr. Flashy's own position weakened. He dodged an assassination attempt in June 2022 while sitting in the back of a taxi, and later failed to appear in court out of fear. If the idea was that the Kinahans would sponsor a clean, endless succession, reality did not cooperate. The retail landscape fractured and turned in on itself. Back across the Irish Sea, the UK story moved into its courtroom phase. For years, Bomber Kavanagh evaded serious charges while planning big deliveries and even using mourning periods to signal strength. After David Byrne's killing at the Regency, Bomber was already arranging a large shipment within 24 hours, a demonstration to enemies and allies alike that business would not be interrupted. In 2019, weapons were found in his fortified home. He was intercepted at Birmingham Airport. Investigations matured. Prosecutors proved his role in shipments worth tens of millions, then suggested that over the decade he had sat at the top of the UK tree. The real number of drugs pushed into British markets was far higher. By 2022, Bomber was sentenced to 21 years. His close partners, Gary Vickery and Daniel Canning, were given 20 and 19.5 years. James Mulvey had already collected 32 years after being taken down by Lithuanian authorities and handed to the UK. In the same period, one of the loudest UK ripples from the cartel's presence was the rise and fall of a Liverpool crew headed by Liam Cornett, with Michael Rice at his right hand. Cornett's network ran county line supply, pushing product from city to towns through runners and phones. A grenade exploding above a wardrobe in a Liverpool house led police to a wave of evidence. Operation Anvil rolled up the group by late 2019. Lavish social media posts of beaches and bottles told the story of the lifestyle. Court numbers told the truth. Then, in April 2022, the tone of the entire story changed with a single press conference. The United States stepped into the ring. Treasury designated the Kinahan Group a transnational criminal organization. The statement placed them alongside Italy's Camorra, Mexico's Los Zetas, Japan's Yakuza, and Russia's thieves-in-law. The State Department added a reward of up to $5 million for information that would lead to the arrest or conviction of Christie Sr., Daniel, and Christie Jr. Posters went up in Dublin City Hall. The US ambassador stood with Irish officials. The National Crime Agency joined the chorus. Sanctions were not symbolic. They cut names and companies out of the global financial system. Accounts froze, transactions failed. The normal frictions of international life became roadblocks. It was the start of a different phase. The Gulf reacted. The United Arab Emirates moved to freeze assets of named targets. Dubai, which had served as sanctuary, recalibrated. Business-friendly does not mean reputation blind. The city that sells stability understands the cost of sheltering people who attract coordinated international sanctions. For the leadership, this meant more than inconvenience. It meant the loss of oxygen. Wealth that cannot move is a cage. Property that cannot be monetized is a concrete anchor. Lawyers and brokers who used to return calls began to do compliance math and pass. The old comfort of being a polite client in a high-end office started to crack. In sport, the reckoning arrived just as fast. MTK Global announced it would cease operations. Fighters and promoters who had thanked Daniel publicly began to explain, distance, or stay silent. Tyson Fury's 2020 video where he credited Daniel with getting a British mega-fight agreed played back under a different light. The leaked paperwork that connected MTK to Do Cashew Consultancy, a Kinahan-associated company later blacklisted by the United States, was revisited. The fact that both entities showed the same address in Jumeirah Lakes Towers raised further questions. Sandra Vaughan's leadership after the rebrand was passed with new eyes. Whether every story in the media was fair or not, the outcome was the same. That boxing bridge that had given Daniel introductions and influence was pulled up. Investigations funded at the European level identified more than 200 companies used for laundering and logistics. Food and textiles fronts were flagged as common covers to shift product and wash cash. This was not romantic. It is the work of modern organized crime. Create a catalogue of banal tradable goods that cross borders every day. Insert contraband and dirty money into that river. Let routine hide criminality. Then watch the same system turn on you when sanctions and joint task forces weaponize compliance. That is what happened here. The network was designed to be resilient, and it still is in places, but the environment has turned hostile. None of this meant the cartel evaporated in 2022. Resilience is not a slogan for these men. It is a way of operating. Analysts close to the matter framed the leadership's priorities in simple terms. Save Daniel, because he was the most exposed. Protect the assets that could be salvaged. Keep selling where channels still existed. If they hit 2 out of 3, the organization would breathe. Another tension grew inside, and it was corrosive. Christopher Sr. began an internal investigation watching for leaks. The paranoia was predictable. For years, the structure had been hierarchical and cellular, with no unit aware of the full shape of the whole. That made infiltration difficult. If information was still getting out, it was more likely to come from the core. Suspicion touched people close to Daniel. The name of Sean McGovern surfaced in rumor and counter-rumor, his proximity making him a magnet for doubts. None of that was proven in public. All of it distracted a leadership that already had bigger problems. Dublin's temperature cooled slightly as Daniel pulled back from overt violence to protect his public reputation in sport, but a source close to the streets said what many feared when the sanctions landed. The gloves will soon be coming off. Lists circulated, names linked to the Regency attack, people to be hunted if the opportunity returned. One number talked about was 29, a retaliatory ledger that would take years to settle. In parallel, Liam Byrne's visibility in the UK made him a priority for police. He took risks. He celebrated freely. He looked like a man who believed the old insulation still worked, and that made him a man investigators believed they could reach. While the Garda chased the cartel and its feud partners, the home market did what it always does and adjusted. The Grundon brothers, running a network known as the Family, grew in the space left by the Kinahans. With resources tied up hunting the cartel and following Jerry Hutch's movements, other crews served customers who never stopped calling. Even then, the cartel was not prepared to surrender its map of Dublin. Reports surfaced that a senior member was sent from Dubai back to the Irish capital to re-establish dominance. The brief was simple: stop the slide, reassert the supply lines, fill the vacuum left by Liam Byrne's departure and legal exposure. Keep rivals from turning a period of pressure into a permanent shift. That effort will run into a coalition that has not lost interest. The head of the Garda has said it out loud. You can run, you cannot hide from justice forever. Partners in the UK and US have made it clear that the cases will not be allowed to drift back into obscurity. That is the difference between this era and the one that fed the rise. By 2025, the timeline reads clearly. A bright Dublin kid took wrong turns, turned prison into a language school, and used that preparation to plug into Spain at the precise moment Europe's cocaine economy was ready for professionalization. He handed Dublin operations to lieutenants, built a structure across Ireland, the UK, Spain, and the Netherlands, and transformed a street gang into a multinational criminal enterprise. He installed his sons in leadership. He used sport to launder an image and open doors. A money dispute with a once trusted associate led to a murder in 2015 that detonated a feud. Dublin's Regency attack in 2016 took the conflict public with a ferocity that stunned a city. Retaliations cascaded, murder kits were staged. A hired hitman from Estonia was caught mid-plan. The leadership moved from Spain to Dubai and enjoyed years of comfort in a skyline that seemed built for men who pay well and ask for privacy. The UK unit ran like a franchise under Bomber, who accumulated wealth and fear in equal measure before being convicted along with his closest allies. The Liverpool offshoot flashed lifestyle until a grenade and a police operation broke it apart. In April 2022, the United States changed the weather with sanctions and a $5 million reward. The Emirates froze assets, MTK Global collapsed, the financial world treated the cartel like toxicity. The organization adapted, shrank, split attention between survival and business, suspected leaks, and eyes its enemies with renewed fury. Rival groups in Dublin filled gaps. The cartel sent men to reclaim space. The state held the line and kept tightening it. This is not a fairy tale with a final page. It is a ledger that keeps adding entries. The arrests of senior figures like Kavanagh matter because they subtract expertise and add panic. The seizures by the Criminal Assets Bureau matter because they strip away theatre and leave reality. The sanctions matter because they remove the grease that makes a machine like this run quietly. The $5 million reward matters because it is a loud number in a world where loyalty is measured against risk. The freezes in Dubai matter because they say the room you thought was safe is now a room with eyes. There is a final truth about modern organized crime that this timeline underlines. The same global economy that lets you move contraband across borders with the help of boring paperwork will be used against you when the coalition forms. Police do not need to kick every door down if bank servers can refuse your wire. They do not need to raid every safe house if they can watch your shell companies fail. They do not need a Hollywood arrest in a hotel lobby if they can make travel a risk every time your passport scans. The Kinahan Group rose because it treated crime like a business. The response is treating it like one too, with audits that bite, partners who do not blink, and tools that do not care about legend. That's where the story stands. An empire shrinking, options narrowing, and the myth of untouchable power cracking. If you want more deep dives like this, hit like, tap subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next chapter.